Okay. Thank you guys for last time. These have been very sparsely attended, but I think James's ideas are really good one. I think covering the content and outcomes from the NOVA Tech Ladder Bridge to Career Success Report is really relevant, I think, to increasing diversity in ICT. And I really want to present this. You may have read it already. This webinar attempts to bring out some of the key points and then how they're related to some of my explorations into what we might do to improve student success on ICT pathways. And so we'll talk about that at the end after I've shared some of what I think are the key points from the report. I don't know if you know, but NOVA and Tech Ladder is an initiative created by NOVA and the Economic Advancement Research Institute, and their goals are to promote access, career advancement, and economic self-sufficiency for workers in all occupations related to ICT. And particularly, they want to expand that access, and particularly in the career ladder itself, from entry level up to higher positions. And obviously, because they're workforce investment, they're interested in enhancing the regional economic competitiveness in preparing these professionals to close the skills gaps. And obviously, they want to promote a more inclusive ICT workforce at all skills levels. So that's why it's relevant to diversity. The report itself was a study that had two components. There was a survey of 117 workers, and there was also, in addition to the surveys, they conducted 17 qualitative interviews where they talked to ICT career professionals for over an hour. It's what we would call an ethnographic study. And it was really pretty interesting. I really liked to see that it was actually facilitated by the San Jose State University's applied anthropology graduate students, which anthropology tends to take a look at culture and how it impacts society and the workplace, etc. So I'm sure that their perspectives in doing this had a lot to do with the kind of the nature of this report. It was really good. So here's the link, and this will be, if this is recorded, you'll have this link if you haven't gone to take a look at the report. So some of the assumptions that they began with in this study is that most underrepresented minority tech workers enter the ICT workforce in entry-level positions. This is something that we've known and talked about for a long time, and we see this as a quite appropriate entry to the pathway, particularly for those students in our case that are coming in through community college programs. But one of the things that is also evident is that ICT employers often view these lower-skilled workers as expensive. They feel that they really don't have any direct connection to the revenue and the performance of the organization. And that's a perception, but that's what's out there. Instead, they view their higher-skilled ICT workers as the foundational aspect, as the foundational portion of their success. So there's more value placed on, those people on the higher end of the pathway or the ladder, as opposed to those that are at the lower end. And their distinction as to their value of these higher skilled ICT workers is not always their technical skills. And we've heard this a lot too. I mean, what they're talking about is most valuable, and what they're really looking for those people that are making a difference in their businesses and their innovations are people that have personal skills. But these personal skills like networking and teamworking and passion for learning and having a growth mindset, those are skills that are not taught. They're rarely taught, rarely even taught informally, let alone formally. But what they're about is how to navigate their careers and the mobility that's necessary in this industry and sector. So the report had the following 4 research propositions. First of all, there is an assumption that career navigation is learned not in formal education, but through exposure, experience, and informal networks with successful career navigators or other, successful workers in the field, mentors, for example. It's not formally taught. Public schools and colleges and other training providers rarely offer these types of skills, training in these types of skills. And there is a lack of emphasis on career navigation in public workforce and education programs, which contributes to a growing inequality and lack of mobility on people on the lower end of the ladder. So creating models for students and job seekers to develop career navigation skills really does align with career success. And I think you have to look at, why navigation and mobility. And we know why. And the reason number 1 is that ICT changes so quickly. The technology becomes outdated and obsolete. And so if you're not mobile as far as learning where you can pick up new skills and understanding what's new and what's needed right now, if you don't have people that are giving you advice as to what you should really look into or have some foresight into where they see things going, then you're going to basically stagnate and not have as much opportunity as someone that does have that mobility. So the study found that these people, these navigators, these people with mobility that have been able to have successful ICT careers over a span of time, have the following characteristics. They had great attitude. And attitude was a major impact or major factor in their success. They have a kind of attitude that's more positive outlook. They tend to be optimistic. They really look for ways to contribute, and they have a kind of attitude that is humble in the way that they can learn from their mistakes and be open to new thoughts and ideas that may be different than their own. They take personal initiative. They are very, self-motivated. They believe they have the power to make their own choices and control their own career destinies. They take initiative to make sure that they are up to date. They won't rely on their employers to ensure that they're current. They will take some accountability for that themselves. They have passion and curiosity. They ask questions and they explore new ideas. They look for, how can they be a valuable commodity to their employer. They have a strong work ethic. Despite despite a more flexible work environment and schedule where people can work from home or are on their own schedule, they still put a demand on themselves to make sure that their work is done, and they demonstrate their willingness to go above and beyond. Then finally, a teamwork. Obviously, the ability to be able to communicate and collaborate with others, because nothing's done alone without teams these days. And then that flexibility and adaptability, that's really the underpinning of that mobility and that willingness to change and be open to learning new technology. And if you guys have any questions, comments, if you've read the report and want to add anything here, please do chime in. So the report called these people bridges. And really, what it comes down to me is that they're called bridges because they are able to not only be very conversant and knowledgeable about what they do, for instance, starting with someone, for example, that is a help desk operator, a help desk support person, for example. A potential bridge in that position is going to be that individual who is really going to want to not only understand what the problem is, but also understand why it's a problem for that person. Okay. And too often, we talk to people on a help desk that they just want to figure out technically how to fix your problem or what's the workaround so that they can go on to the next call. But I think if we learn, and I can say from my own experience, because I did start in my first job was in customer support as a technical representative, and I think if you take the time to really understand, what this problem, the impact that this problem is having on the person on the other end of the line, that's the beginning of developing that kind of ability to connect with people, and the ability to be effective in communicating in technical issues in a non-technical way, and in a way that the people that are using the technology are going to understand and feel that you care about getting their problem resolved. That's the beginning of how it all begins to develop.
One other comment on that, if I might.
Sure.
It's also understanding the impact to the organization. Why is it important that a user be able to do their job? Understanding the value that they create, the contribution that they have in the organization, and having respect for that, and allowing that to create an urgency for solving that problem. That sort of big picture context is important.
Yeah, so you're saying not only for the perspective of the customer or something that the person that you're helping, but also how what you do actually impacts the big picture for you, the company that you work for.
Exactly, and how that user impacts the big picture, and why it's important that that user be functional.
Right, right. And I think that if we, we can look back at that now and say, that's how we would really like to see all of our, help desk technicians perceive and view their jobs. And I really think that it's a two-way street. That conclusion, that assumption made earlier that these low-skilled ICT workers have less. They're almost like a cost center. They're an expense, as opposed to something that really does have an impact on the performance and the reputation of the company.
Yes, and this is true not only of people in help desk kinds of roles, but really for all roles within an IT operation. Understanding, a business department's function and why it's important that that department be able to function, and how they add value to the goals or the mission of the enterprise, and being able to prioritize things in those contexts. That is very important.
We had when I was responsible for field support for the telco companies for Tandem Computers years ago, we did a survey. We did a survey of our customer. How are we doing? What are we doing? What are we doing well and continue? What are we doing different? What can we change? And the management from Pac Bell came back to us and told us, you guys are great. You guys really know your stuff, but we sure wish you knew more about our business.
Yep.
And you know what? I was kind of taken aback by that. I said, wow, they're right. And so what we did was we we began a couple of series of meetings where we would have, you know, a guest from the client come in and talk to our team about their department's function and what they did and how they fit with Impact Bell and why the tandem application that they were using was so important and how it fit into their overall function. And it was really, it did make a significant difference. My analysts were a lot more empathetic. They would ask questions if they weren't clear. They really they wanted to get to know even more about the department. So if they heard about some function that they had never met the person, they wanted to find out, well, who is this person? Let me find out a little bit more about them. So it really did, you know, it was really something to learn. But I must admit, I was kind of blindsided by it because I think I was caught into that same type of assumption of what kind of narrow in not only why we were important to the customer, but why, you know, the customer is important to us. So it was really good to know.
Yeah.
So the report identified these 5 activities of bridges, and these are the people, they're calling them bridges, that they do a lot of networking, that they are constantly looking for connections with their peers. They attend networking events. They're always looking for ways in which they can find someone to know something that they can learn. So they really pretty much look at the network as kind of like the scaffolding for their careers. They're very good at organizational reading, and that means, at least it's described in the report as the ability to actually kind of be aware of what's going on within the organization, the culture, how what you're doing fits within that culture, where you may see trends as far as where the organization's leadership decisions are going to be made. In other words, it's what, in terms of emotional intelligence, this is called social awareness. Having a heightened awareness of the things that are going on around you within the environment and the people. And then there's self-awareness, and this is really knowing, you know, who you are, what your skills are, a really accurate assessment of who you are, how you feel, and what your choices are. And then the relationship management, again, I think you can't be a very good networker if you're not good with relationship management. But also it's important to nurture positive, optimistic relationships with the people that you work with, your clients, and again, the people in your network, which this all seems to overlap in my opinion. And then finally, mentorship. They all really took advantage of mentors, either formally or informally. They always knew that there was someone that was going to be able to give them guidance, advice, feedback on their decisions, share their wisdom as far as, you know, experience they've had in moving up the ladder. So again, these are, again, it reminds me an awful lot of the keynote that Jay Banfield gave at the winter conference, that again, these skills just keep popping up as a differentiator as to, you know, what employees are looking for from the employer perspective and what employees or prospective ICT workers really have to look at how they are developed. So up until now, at least, you know, from what we've been talking about, a lot of this is really dependent on the individual, and that's really what the report has said, that there's no formal training. A lot of this is done by the individual themselves. And so the question still comes to me is that these are competencies of emotional intelligence. And I know from my background and experience that emotional intelligence is learned. And it can be coached and mentored, particularly by people that are in positions such as educators. And so this is just a mapping of some of this is the quadrant of the competencies of emotional intelligence, and the items in red font here come right out of that report. Self-awareness, organizational awareness, adaptability, initiative, building bonds, teamwork, and collaboration. So if we can begin to look at ways in which these types of skills are developed in our curriculum or in opportunities for faculty development, because we are looking at things like the career readiness workshop that was developed by Baytech. I mean, some of the skills practiced in that workshop help faculty demonstrate these kind of skills.
Before you go further, could I make one comment? Could you go back 2 slides?
Mm-hmm.
So you made the comment that employers are really looking for these things. Those are indicators of someone who creates value in the organization. It's extremely important to them as employers. I would add the comment that these things are also critical for creating job satisfaction for the individual worker as well. To be connected, to have meaningful relationships with people, to know what's going on in the organization, to understand who you are and how you fit into it, and to have the support of people who are more experienced and knowledgeable in the organization. Those things make work a whole lot more rewarding. So it's not just something that you do to try to benefit your employer. It's something that you do in order to benefit yourself. And job and career advancement comes naturally with this because there's just harmony between the desires of the organization and the way you're being in that organization when these 5 activities are undertaken.
Thank you, James, for reminding me that. I have this big grin on my face because, yeah, right there in the middle there, self-awareness I talked about in my latest blog. I'm saying, that is the center. I mean, the quality of your experience, it doesn't matter whether it's work or life, it's centered around these things. It's centered around your awareness of self, and then from that, it goes out into what I call the other awareness, and that is the relationship management, networking with people, working with other people, and then the outer awareness, which is the organizational reading and how you fit within the whole thing, and the whole whatever it is, whether it's your family, where you work, or whatever you're doing. So you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And if that self-awareness piece is missing, it's really hard to have any success with the others. And it really is it's directly related to the quality of everything else that goes on. So yeah, you want to be happy in your job. If this is not happening for you, then maybe you're not in the right place. So good point. Thank you for reminding me of that. I kind of look at things from But
this is clear. I think what is significant here is that there is a threshold, to go from the basic jobs to the more rewarding jobs, and these are the skills that people will move up very quickly to find a place where they are satisfied, where they are feeling like they contribute, and it's really tough for those who don't have, who are not equipped. And you mentioned something that people don't learn that, we can teach that. I think the sad thing is that some people come more equipped because of their family environment, social environment. Things that they were, in preschools. Preschool starts that. Kids are already some of these skills, and this is really what I find really tough is that when you arrive at the adult age and you have people who have not been exposed to these models about all these qualities or these skills, and then you have to inculcate them to them that stuff.
But that's true, and I think that the point that James made and that I'm making is that you can come from you can come from a less advantaged place, and you can you can be successful in getting that first step into one of these low-skilled jobs, right? Mm-hmm. But if you are unhappy and you're feeling resentment, or you're not feeling that the quality of your work is acknowledged or appreciated, I think that's going to have an impact on your self-awareness and the choices that you can make to move up, right? And I think that if you, as James pointed out, are conscious and aware of the importance of what you do to the customer and to the organization for which you work, and take some pride and dignity in that, that becomes part of the self-awareness that can toss them out into some of these other skills of, now you begin to create relationships. You have an organizational reading and awareness that says, okay, I've got pretty good at this. I think now I can move on to that. And you're networking, and you're in other words, you're expanding from that place. And you more optimistic. This is when the attitude comes in, mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. And I think that's one of the things, the reason why I think organizations like Year Up have been successful, because as they are preparing their participants with the skills, they're also preparing them with these types of characteristics, these types of non-cognitive skills. And so
I would simplify. I would simplify and say, regardless of your role in an organization, if you do these 5 things, you will grow and thrive.
Yeah.
And the employer will take notice, and your career will advance as a result.
Yes.
That's very good.
So just one more, review of their conclusions from the report. Obviously, what we talked about, little is being done in education to develop these skills. The existing workforce systems are lacking in tools and trainings to develop these skills. And so their suggestion is more research and a deeper understanding of these of how these characteristics are acquired is needed. And there probably should be programs that offer exposure, experience, and interaction. And so they mentioned in they mentioned in the report that they have received a grant to continue exploration to address some of these questions and conclusions by working with the Stride Center. And that sounds like a really promising initiative, and I intend to follow up on that and see if there's anything that we can continue to learn from what they're learning.
Yeah, I think this is, I find it very exciting also, because I think the Stride Center, in some respect, has a very similar objective as Europe, but may not have spent so much attention to these components as Europe has, and this funding would really assist them in, maybe adjusting their programs to have this dimension more developed than they used to before, where they were, I think Stride Center was concentrating a lot into technical training and not as much into that dimension.
Well, yeah, and the other thing too is that I really like what, I'm curious as to how they're going to, how they're going to teach this. I think that obviously you can provide the exposure, put people in the environment, and similar to what Europe is doing, while you have teachers, while you have facilitators and teachers working with the non-cognitive skills, preparing them with how to network and how to communicate and how to work in a team and how to write a resume, how to make sure your email is written properly, etc., those type of things. But there's some basics here that I'm just curious as to how they're going to get that across, as far as just the kind of human interactions related to understanding self. So anyway, I definitely am going to follow up with Luther and ask to stay involved, at least aware. If he can just keep me in the loop of what they're doing, it'd be really helpful. And I think what we can learn in some of these questions, like, is there anything that we can do as far as from the education system? We talk a lot about career readiness in the curriculum. We've got working on these great partnerships, that have at least have started to have some fruit. But is it the best thing to do to delegate, for instance, the way TechSF has got some success in addressing this by relying on the CBO to prepare potential internees on how they should interview, how they should conduct themselves, coaching them on showing up on time and things like that, as opposed to how do we kind of integrate it into our curriculum. So anyway, those are the questions I think that I'm still asking, and I think there are best practices out there, but I don't know. I'm a little befuddled sometimes as to why they're not being adopted. So these questions are put out there for you and your thoughts on, what are some of the things that we might think about doing to offer or suggest to NOVA and Stride. Do we put forth best practices like Europe? Do we think out of the box? What are some of your ideas?
It's tough. It's really tough to. These are really big questions, and we try to already change it's related in a way, to introduce problem-based learning in the curriculum, to get away from the lecturing that is so inefficient. So there is actually time in the curriculum to integrate these components, but as you mentioned, there is nothing. I mean, there is nothing that is off the shelf to pass into a mass training, of faculty. So it's like awareness and the people internalizing the need for passing on some of these qualities in their teaching. And we know how very difficult it is to do it, you know. And so you mentioned
there's a lot of reliance on experiential learning. In other words, internships, which we talked about yesterday, apprenticeships. But there's, you know, it's with so much, with so much pointing at that as the solution, and there's so little of it out there. There's just so little, so few programs. You know, it's such an ad hoc and often sometimes siloed. I mean, I was really kind of interesting to see the email that James shared that SF City is really getting behind internships for San Francisco Unified, and wow, if we had had a little heads up that, you know, this is going to happen this summer, we could have begun to work with the kids and, you know, have something ready to go. They only got another month in school, and, you know, you see how even doing a dual enrollment program, you know, takes months to plan. And so these internship and experiential learning opportunities seem to just come flying through ad hoc, and I really don't think we should rely on that. I think that particularly, and I also read in the paper this morning that a lot of four-year schools are backing out of internships because of legal issues and stuff. And so I'm saying, well, you know, if we're going to have all of this kind of like mess around internship and experiential learning, we better look at some other ways of doing this. You know, and I really hope that we can come up with somewhere where there's some kind of either a professional development or some way in which we integrate this into the curriculum. You know, as an
one comment I have is, you know, said earlier that applying those 5 recommendations can help someone thrive and grow and advance in any role. And that includes their role as a student in an educational environment.
Correct.
And if a department or a program can try to understand that and create opportunities for these things with the students in the middle of programs, that can make a big difference. Having social events where networking can take place. Faculty coaching or mentoring makes a huge difference. Bringing in outside mentors to interact with the students. Helping students assess their own capabilities. Having a broader understanding of the industries and the workplace environments that they're preparing themselves for. It's not so much a question of what you teach, but how you teach, and what is the environment and the culture in which all of that takes place. And I think that's part of the challenge back to education, is how can we cultivate these characteristics within the educational program environment.
You're absolutely right that this is not just an ICT. These are qualities that are not only wanted and needed by IC industry employers. This is every employer would love to have these kind of bridges. And I really like what you're saying, James, that, you know, just as the K-12 looked at really revamping the Common Core and integrating critical thinking and problem solving all the way down to, you know, grammar school, I think we have to start looking at those kids that have not gone through that yet and say, well, what do we do for our, you know, high school and community college students? Maybe we should, you know, what just some courses. I would call it life success, you know, and begin to talk, you know, give them opportunities to get exposure by bringing it to the classroom and giving them the opportunity to develop those types of values and skills and motivation.
And one message that might incent faculty and program management is that these are characteristics that will generate student success and also, program success, in addition to workplace success, no matter what role or what kind of organization.
Yeah.
They're general life skills, and they will help you succeed in any environment.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I really want to pursue this. I don't know. It may or may not be something that we can do right away. But I think in our findings from the 2.5 years of working the diversity aspects of MPICT's goals, I really think that this is where pursuing how we build these skills, because these are human skills. They have nothing to do with your gender or your ethnicity or your background or anything. These are human skills, and I think if we can have an impact on this, I think this lifts everyone. And I think that would be the finding from what the work I would suggest as what we've learned from this aspect of the grant. And going forward, that should be the recommendation, that how we have to look at ways in which we do this, in which we actually, education actually responds to how we help develop these skills.
I think there's another thing here, and that is education tends to be focused on knowledge and skills, but these are really more qualities and characteristics, and it's a different kind of target than educators traditionally think about. But those qualities and characteristics are so very important for life and workplace success.
Well, I think education is starting to think about those things, and I think that's why the Common Core has changed. I had an opportunity briefly to sit in on when we were down for the dual enrollment conference in January. I sat on a session called Common Core 101. And it really does the curriculum includes critical thinking, problem solving, perspective taking across the curriculum. And because it feels that those are the type of skills that are going to not only help them learn, but basically that help them develop those qualities of being, curious and questioning and asking. And I don't think they would be doing that or wanting to change the curriculum unless they wanted to develop some qualitative skills in our kids. But I think educators are thinking about it. They really, at least, they're starting to think about it. And we know that they're hearing it from the employers for us in the, post-secondary. So I think we could have some, I think we might have some ears to this. I think there might be.
But I think, the K-12 certainly needed this Common Core, and it's going to be a big challenge to implement it. On the other hand, this discussion does not exist systematically post-secondary. It's still very much focused on content and expertise, and there is at the fringes, efforts that are made, but it's not something that has come in front center like it has for K-12.
Yeah.
Obviously, you would expect that, that's the expectation that, when the student is adult and comes to the university or to the college, they've already acquired the skills in K-12 for, and that's what the expectation. But it's not really true. We have to do a lot of remediation and at that level as well.
Yeah.
But we're a little bit behind because we talk about student success, but student success, when you look at it, it's about having a degree and a certificate in a certain field. It doesn't really talk about, as you mentioned it, Olivia, the Common Core is integral to the new Common Core, is problem solving and team working, etc. And for at the college level, it has not arrived at that level yet.
No.
As far as I can see, maybe I don't have all the.
I agree.
Yeah,
it has not. It hasn't got there yet. And, maybe a little bit. But my point is that I think there are some people out there, and you're right. They may be just on the fringes, but there are some people that realize that change needs to happen. And so we'll at least make that. We'll further this with the research and what we found. And my point is, I think when we do our report on what we learned from this grant around improving diversity in ICT, I think that's a key learning. That this is the change, and these are the skills that have to be developed, and here's a possible way in which that can happen. And we'll see what happens.
And the BayTech Las Vegas thing is a step in that direction.
Exactly. And the problem-based learning, scenario-based learning, same thing.
Yeah.
From the perspective of diversity, I would call out the importance of this mentorship component. Anecdotally, one of the primary things I've encountered that lead to success for currently underrepresented populations is really some faculty member or mentor who a student feels like they can identify with and who understands the student, genuinely cares about them, and provides advice and assistance to keep them from losing spirit or losing interest and not pursuing the program. So I do think that mentoring component within a program is something that faculty could pay discrete attention to.
But you know what? One of the things too is that I think that comes back to what you were saying earlier, also, James, is that the individual has to have some qualities and motivations to want to mentor.
Yeah, reach to mentor. That's right.
You have to want to mentor. If you are an assigned a mentor and you don't want to mentor, I've seen that. I've worked with kids, that basically they have no interest, and it doesn't matter whether you give them a mentor or not. But if they're in a program, in other words, if you're right, in your scenario, they are in a program, but they're maybe having, some running into some barriers or some difficulties, and they want to succeed, a mentor's perfect. But how do you, you motivate that? I think there's some other things, and it came out in the report. There were a couple of comments in the report about, a lot of the people that have been able to successfully navigate, up this career path are also driven by a passion. I mean, they really want it. Okay, and they're not good, and they reached out to mentors because they weren't sure how to do it. And that's where a mentor really comes in and can be helpful. To be a mentor to someone who needs a mentor but doesn't, think they need a mentor, that takes a special kind of training of the mentor.
Yeah.
Not to say it can't.
I have one other comment, and that is that I would like to express, appreciation and respect and admiration for the Silicon Valley Nova Workforce Investment Board for producing this report and other reports that they have produced. This is one organization that really gets ICT and its importance to the economy and to all kinds of employers across all sorts of industries. And just kudos to them as a shining star in the California workforce system. And encourage people to read this report if they have not.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons I really wanted to record this, so that I could share this with them and also with the rest of our community, because I also believe that this was just a fabulous study. It was very well done. I think involving some of their partners, particularly San Jose State, and their view of this as a cultural issue, I think is fabulous. Very well written too. So yeah, I ditto James, and definitely want to spread the word about this report. It's very good.
And thank you, Olivia. I think you did a great job with this webinar, and appreciate you taking the lead on this.
Great, thank you. Thank you guys for attending and having someone to throw this stuff back at me. I really appreciate it. So.
Oh, this is great. I scanned the report, and really this encourages me to read it, more in details, because it really you summarize pretty well what, and I want to go a little deeper in it. So that's what I'm going to do. So it's really great.
Very good. Okay, gentlemen, if there's anything else, I will in the webinar and put the word out that it has been recorded and encourage people to listen to it.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.